Were you drafted or did you enlist?
I volunteered.
Do you remember what year that was?
43, the end of 43 or beginning of 44.
And where were you living at the time?
In Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Why did you enlist?
Well, I thought nurses would be needed and were needed, and also because I had a young brother who was going in the Marine Corps, and I thought he might need some attention sometime, and I would maybe not take care of him, but I'd release a nurse who could take care of him. And that's mainly the reason. Plus, I love the water, being on the water near the shore.
Why did you pick the Navy?
Because of water. But when I got in, I wasn't a very good sailor.
You were? What happened?
As soon as we passed the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, I became seasick. And I was sick almost to Guam.
Oh,
No, to Hawaii. And then after that, sailing was all right.
Oh, wow. Do you recall your first days in service? Where did you go right away after you enlisted?
Well, I had to go to Brooklyn I spent a couple of days being sworn in and so forth, and physical exams, and then I went to Norfolk, Virginia, for indoctrination, and it was connected with the Naval Hospital in Norfolk. And our group spent some duty time on the wards in the Naval Hospital, but we also had a lot of class work and getting measured for uniforms and getting them all supplied and fitted and all. So that was, I forget how long that was, a couple of weeks or more, I guess.
As a Navy nurse, did you have basic training like the guys did or no?
Not really, no. We did have some drills with Marine Corps officers, but they were more for our physical condition, really. We did a lot of marching around the grounds. And that was fun, yes, at Norfolk.
And that was fun?
Yes. And then at the end of our indoctrination, we were presented to the president or the chief down there in Norfolk, you know, as a new group for the Navy.
And where did you go after your training at Norfolk?
St. Albans Naval Hospital in Long Island.
And how long did you stay there and what were your duties?
Oh, I was there not quite a year, I guess. And shortly after I got there, I and a few other nurses and the chief nurse met with the captain at St. Albans, and they decided that I should teach the corpsmen. And I went in because I wanted to take care of the wounded, and I was assigned to the basement of the Corps school, at the Corps headquarters, giving classes to the female corpsmen. I did that for a few months.
So how did you like being an instructor?
Well, I liked it, but it wasn't what I went in for. But very soon the chief nurse came to me and she said, I know you want to change. I didn't ask for anything, but she said I was getting orders. for overseas. But didn't know where. We didn't know where we were going till we got there, and that was to Guam.
Wow. Now, when you were in St. Albans, do you remember any of your instructors? Or any of the other officers?
Well, the nurses I worked with, we were all officers.
What was your rank at that time?
Ensign.
When you enlisted, did you become an ensign right off?
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Before you became an instructor of the other corpsmen, what did you do? Did you work in the hospital there?
Yes, and even when I was teaching weekends, I had to take turns doing duty on the floors in the hospital.
Now, had you already been an RN or an LPN
Oh, yes.
in civilian life before you joined?
Yes, I was. I have an RN and a BN from the Yale School of Nursing.
Oh, what year did you graduate?
1934.
Wow. And where were you doing your nursing when the war broke out?
I was doing public health nursing in Bridgeport. That meant school nursing and infant welfare.
What was life like at St. Albans?
It was very nice. The quarters were lovely, and girls were all interesting from all around the country. And
You lived in barracks?
oh, we had lovely, lovely dormitory rooms, our own rooms mostly. And in fact, when I first got there, I was rooming with another girl. But when they assigned me to the Corps School, I got my own room. The chief nurse thought I would like that, having to do homework and all.
So when you got your orders, you didn't know where you were going, but you knew you were going overseas?
Well, there was a step in between that when I went to San Diego.
Ah. And what did you do in San Diego?
Well, I worked on the floor, caring for fellows coming back from the Pacific. And that's where I got an inkling of where I was going, because some of the fellas, I said I was going to Fleet Hospital 111, and they said that's on Guam. They saw signs pointing to Fleet Hospital 111. But we didn't know for sure until we got there.
So, and seeing these guys coming home, you must have had an idea of what you were going to be in for. What was it? What were your feelings while you were in San Diego and seeing these guys that were coming back?
Well, I remember one weekend I did night duty on the psychiatric ward, and that was very sad. The fellas were all very disturbed. And my office was a glassed-in portion of the floor, and it was locked. I was locked in there, and they were locked out. And I thought, I hoped I wouldn't see too much of that.
How long were you in San Diego before you shipped out?
Oh, it was just a matter of months. I'm trying to think. Maybe 4 or 5 months, I think.
Do you remember the year?
It was 44.
Did you have any leave time to go home before you shipped overseas?
Not really. I had every other weekend off when I was in Long Island. I could come home to Bridgeport. But when I was out in San Diego, of course, no, we didn't have any time. And yeah, I know it was 44 because we spent Christmas on board ship going to Guam.
Oh, you did. So Christmas of 1944,
4.
you were on your way overseas?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Do you remember what ship you sailed on? Did you sail right out of San Diego?
Yes, they were Liberty ships, they were called. And there was another one with nurses going. There were 2 ships went. And the other, I think, had Army nurses on it. And it was named for a general. I can't remember the name. And they didn't tell us much about where we were or where we were going. You know, everything was a big secret. And I sort of tried to wipe everything out of my mind so I wouldn't have to have anything to tell anybody anyway.
Oh, all right. Now, your ship, was it just nurses? Was it a whole shipload of nurses going over? Soldiers?
There were many nurses, and there were some CBs, I think. And we had escort, a naval escort. In fact, Christmas Day, they sent us greetings from their ships. They were in the distance. We could hardly see them, you know, on each side of us, going out as protection. And we were blacked out at night. And we were really crowded. Our room, I try to think how many were in it. It was a room about this big. And there was one wall with a few sinks. And, let's see, 3, 6, 12. There must have been 15 of us in there. Triple bunks.
Holy cow.
And, let's see. Yeah, triple bunks. And I know I was seasick, and the doors and the lockers were banging, slamming, and I'm laying there hoping it would soon be over, you know.
Well, I bet you weren't
miserable.
the only one.
And no, I wasn't, but there were a few who were getting around, and it was blacked out if you had to go out to the lavatory. Big black curtains and going through passageways, all black. You were in another world.
Couldn't have been much fun.
Very miserable.
So it was the 2 ships of nurses and then 2 escort ships?
Yes, yeah.
And you stopped at Hawaii on the way?
Yes.
So how long were you in Hawaii?
A couple of days, I guess. And
could you get off
maybe,
the ship and
yes,
go on
we were
land?
off, yes. And I remember we went to the Moana Hotel for dinner. I don't know whether it was the night we arrived or what. And I met a fellow who was married to a cousin of mine in the dining room.
All the way
At the
on the other side of the world?
At the Moana Hotel, yes.
Wow.
The Moana is a very old hotel on the main beach there.
Did you get to see Pearl Harbor while you were on Hawaii?
No. We did take a ride. We went around, saw some pineapple fields and so forth. And then that night that we had dinner, we walked around town a bit, the main street there. But it was all very quick, and we were on our way again. Then we stopped at Eniwetok. That's where the atom bomb was first tested, I think.
How long were you at Eniwetok?
A couple of days and nights.
Did you get off the ship there?
Yes. We were, the ship was our quarters, but we were invited to a party on Eniwetok. A party consisted of some music and dancing, you know, and all the fellas And we talk, of course, a very small place. And it must have been everyone on Enowetok was in this room for dancing. And they had their own orchestra and all.
Well, those guys probably hadn't seen so many
No.
women in one place in a long time.
And there were some Army nurses and Navy nurses. And so then the next day, the head nurse, now how was it? While we were in the dancing, a couple of officers asked another nurse and I to go out. They had like a little paved area for tennis or something and some chairs, and go out there and cool off a bit and relax, you know. So the next day we received invitations for a picnic on the beach at Enowetok with a couple of the officers. But they had to go through the chief nurse. So the invitation was extended to her, and she said it was up to us if we wanted to go or not. But we wanted to go. And so they came in a little captain's gig. We had to go down the side of our ship and get into it. And they had a lovely lunch because they were officers on one of the destroyers that had escorted us out, was escorting us out to Guam. And we had a very nice lunch. They had it all packed, made up in their galley, you know. And I got a very bad sunburn on the outside of my knee. I was covered because it was so close to the equator. It was very direct. And but that didn't bother me at that time. Later on, I had a little problem with it. But that was an interesting little stop at Enowetok anyway.
Oh, that was a nice little picnic.
Yeah. The two officers and another nurse, a nice girl. We weren't especially friends, but we were in the same group, and she was a nice girl.
Now, were you still an ensign at this time? Or had you been?
I was still an ensign. Mm-hmm.
And after you left Enowetok, where did you go?
Guam was the next stop. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember landing at Guam?
Yes.
Did you know it was Guam by now? You knew where you were going?
Not really. They still hadn't said anything about where we were going. But different people knew other people, and it was at Agana, Agana. That was the capital of Guam. And that's where we pulled in. And it was a shambles because the Japanese had it, and it was just retaken from them.
Do you remember what it was like, what your impression was when you got off the boat at Guam? Or, well, actually, you landed at Ghana?
I thought, well, this looks like a shambles. I wonder where the hospital is or where we're going. Still didn't know.
Where was the hospital?
Well, it was out a ways, out of the limits of the town, but there was nothing in the town at all. Nobody around. And we went, big trucks, like weapons carriers, they call them, drove us out to Fleet Hospital 111. And there was an Army hospital. I forget what that was. There were Army nurses there. But they weren't on board ship with us. I think they were on the other ship that went out.
So the Army had their own hospital and the Navy had their own hospital? Mm-hmm. Was the Army hospital close to the Navy hospital on?
No. I was never there, never saw it, no.
So when they took you, what was the name of that hospital on Guam?
Where I went?
Yep.
Fleet Hospital 111.
That's all they called it? Fleet Hospital 111?
Yeah, It wasn't a hospital before, it was one they built. Agana did have a hospital in town, but that wasn't in use, and this was built by the Navy.
Wow.
And they weren't Quonset huts. Our unit, I think they had planned for us to go to Alaska because they didn't expect the war to be ending as soon as it did in Europe, and they were going up to Alaska and over into Russia that way. And so these buildings were made of metal with gabled roofs, and the Quonset hut was a rounded sort of roof.
Now, what was the hospital made of? Was it?
Same as, all the buildings were the same.
They were.
Steel sides and a gabled roof. Long oblong buildings.
Now, where did you sleep? Where were your quarters? In a separate building from the hospital?
Yes, yes. The nurses' quarters, and it was separate from the doctors and from the hospital and from the dining area. They were all separate buildings. And when we got there, they weren't quite complete, so we had to climb up to get up onto the floor. There were just one floor, and there were 4 rooms, just like this building, only much smaller. And the 2 end rooms had 3 nurses each, and the 2 center rooms had 2 nurses. So that was 10 in a building, in one building. And it was all muddy, and we had to climb up to get up on the floor. But the CBs who came with us then, they were put to work, and they put like a deck outside the door and steps. Then eventually they screened it in, so we had a little place to sit. And then they made some chairs like those Adirondack chairs and put them out there. So it became quite comfortable, considering.
Home away from home. Now, when you arrived, did they have patients already at the Naval Hospital?
No, well, they had 1 or 2.
So really, it was that new?
We went.
You want me to stop this? So there weren't any patients at the hospital yet?
No, just a few, maybe Corman or somebody who'd cut his finger or something like that. You know, we had to set the hospital up and prepare for, we didn't know what. We didn't even know then. But it became the Iwo Jima campaign.
So, tell me about setting up the hospital. What did you do to get ready to make it an operating hospital?
Well, we had to set all the beds up and have them made and stock the medicines, all the supplies and all linen closets, and get the paperwork all out and ready. And
how big of a hospital? How many beds? How many patients could you?
Don't even know that, but let's see, the buildings had 4 wards in them. The center was where the kitchen was, and 4 wings went off of that, like 4 wards. And I'd say there were about 25 in each wing, so that'd be 100 right there. And there were maybe 3 or 4 more of those.
So
it was pretty big, pretty big
patients.
hospital, yeah.
Did each kitchen do their own cooking for the wards
No.
that were off them?
No. The food was in another building, and it was brought there and just served from the kitchen. So there was never any food there, only maybe some milk or something. And I remember when the prisoners came from, you know, when MacArthur was released, all the prisoners up in, now where were they? Well, it was after the bomb and everything, and everybody was coming through. We had a lot of the prisoners come through Guam.
A lot of the Japanese prisoners or the American?
No, the American.
Prisoners that had been released? Maybe the ones from Bataan?
Some of them.
So, once you got your hospital ready, it probably was in 1945 by now?
Yes,
beginning
it
of
was, yeah.
1945?
Because I know that's when the Iwo Jima campaign was, I think in February of 45.
Now, was the Iwo Jima campaign the first big influx of patients for you?
Yes.
Did you know what to expect, or was it all of a sudden?
No, we didn't know.
So just one day, what happened?
Well, they started coming, and we were on duty, and I know I stayed on. I never went off duty. I was all day and all night. And they were just covered with the ash from Iwo Jima. You know, that was a volcanic island. And the Japanese were all dug in there, and it was quite a campaign, very bloody and bad. And you had to clean the patients all up first before you could. Those are the ones they flew down. Some came by ship, but the ones they flew needed attention quickly, you know.
Was there an airfield, a landing strip right there at the hospital?
Well, there was a B-29 base right close by.
So they'd fly into there and then bring them over in ambulances?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember any of the individual soldiers that came from the Iwo Jima campaign?
I remember one Marine from Texas, and his bed was right in front of my desk, and he was a handsome, big fellow, sort of reddish blonde, curly hair, and he was paralyzed from his chest down from a spinal injury. That was the unit I was in, neurosurgical problems. And they just did emergency work really there, get them ready then to fly them either to Hawaii or home to California. So he was there. They tried to get him in condition for transporting. But I remember one day a group of the fellows got around, patients too who were ambulatory, singing The Yellow Rose of Texas. And he was singing with them. It was very touching.
Oh, how nice for him.
Yes.
And so, did he finally get flown back?
Yes, he was flown, and then we never knew what happened to them. There was another fellow who was injured. He was a Marine from a Marine base, and he was standing on the plane checking the propeller, and the propeller moved, and it sheared off a section of his head. And he was unconscious, laying there for several days. And one day, they'd had him to surgery. And one day, I saw his fingers tapping on the table in time to the music that was playing. And I thought, my goodness, something is getting through. And it did get through. He was conscious, and he seemed to be all right. He went home too. I never knew. But I know he got up and he was walking, and he went to the lavatory. And he wasn't supposed to be alone. He had gone, so I went to get him. And he was much taller than I, and he started to slump, so the two of us went down together. But nobody was hurt. It was all right. But the fellows used to sit and read to him, read his letters to him that came, and never knew, you know, whether he was getting it or not. But when the fingers started tapping, that was wonderful.
Wow. Do you remember any of the other cases that you had?
Those two stand out, really. There was another one, a young fella, seemed like a little boy, and he'd been a flamethrower. Do you know what that is? I guess it's a great big heavy instrument, and they set things on fire. And he was badly wounded, and he passed away at the hospital there.
And he was in the Battle of Iwo Jima?
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember how long you were stationed at Guam?
We got there, we were on board ship at Christmas time, so it was right about the first of the year, 45, that we got to Guam, and the campaign, the Iwo Jima and Okinawa campaigns were February and March.
And then when did you leave Guam?
So then the war ended in, I think it was like August of that year.
45.
And
You were still on?
I was still there. And I was home at Thanksgiving, I think. So it was between August and Thanksgiving.
What was a typical day like for you at the hospital while you were stationed at Guam? Like what time would you get up and go into work and?
Let me see, I think the day started at 8. And then we'd have lunch. And that was back in the dining room. We did a lot of walking around the base to get back and forth. And then a couple of hours in the afternoon, and then we were off about 4 o'clock or so.
So your duties in the hospital, were you always in that same ward?
That's the only ward I worked on, a unit.
What kinds of patients would you typically see there?
Anyone with any neurological problem, nerve damage, or, paralysis and things like that.
As the patients came in and you got to talk to them, did you then become aware of what was happening? You must have got descriptions of the battles that were going on, so you could tell how the war was progressing?
Well, somewhat. Some of them you couldn't talk to too much, and they weren't supposed to do much talking anyway about where they were or what was going on. So it was more about home and their parents and their relatives and all.
Now, at the time you were serving in Guam, your brother was in the Marine Corps. Did you know where he was?
No, but he appeared on Guam, stopped at Guam on his way to China.
You didn't know he was coming?
No.
What a surprise.
Yes.
What was that like? Where were you when he showed up?
Well, he called me, and he was, now, I guess their ship was their base, and I don't know what part of the coast they were pulled into, but an officer from the Air Force, B-29 base, was there, and I knew some of the officers there, and one of the officers took me to see him, to see my brother. And then he got a ride and came and visited one day. And he could eat in the line with the enlisted men. I couldn't have him in the dining room where I went, but he had a good meal there anyway. But he looked very tired and bedraggled looking, mostly in the hold of the ship coming over, I guess. He was a corporal.
So he was just arriving in the war at that time?
Yes, yes.
And did you know, or did he even know where he was going?
No, he didn't know where he was going, but it was China finally, and he was in the cartography where they were working on the maps, you know. And of course that was always he was always drawing something and scribbling. In fact, he'd be doing his homework lots of times, and my mother would say, "What's this?" All around the border of the page were guns and cannons and ships, and so there he was. They took advantage of that talent, and he became a tool designer when he came home.
That must have been pretty exciting for you to be all the way over on the other side of the world and to
I
meet
know
your brother.
Yes, yeah.
It must have been for him too.
Well, he was happy. Also, one day I was getting into a Jeep. We didn't go any place only if some group was entertaining, and they were always entertaining, you know, the fellas. They were thinking up parties to invite the nurses. But they had to come and go to the captain's office and the chief nurse first, and they had to be armed because there were still Japanese scattered around the island. And they had to sign in, and who was going, and we had to sign in. Then they had to come back and sign out too, and we did. But what was I going to say about that? One day I was getting into a Jeep, and a Jeep pulled in, and there was a doctor from Bridgeport, Connecticut, in the Jeep.
Can you imagine?
Yes. Can you imagine that?
No. What a small world.
Small world,
Even
yes.
then,
yes.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. Did you see any combat while you were there?
No. We had a couple of threats of air raids, but that's all.
Now, when were you promoted to lieutenant? Were you still an ensign in Guam?
While I was on Guam, I became a JG.
Did they have a ceremony?
No.
Did that change your duties at all?
No.
What's JG stand for?
Junior grade, lieutenant junior grade.
So then were
The
you...
next would be full lieutenant, and it kind of went according to time that you were in. And
So when you became a lieutenant, were you then in charge of other nurses underneath you?
not really. We all worked together.
What was the relationship between the doctors and the nurses, working conditions?
Very good, very nice. The neurologist that was in charge of the unit I was on was from La Jolla, California. James Birss, his name was.
Birss, B-U-R-S?
B-I-R-S-S. I can remember that.
And he was there the whole time you were there?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
he was the neurological?
Mm-hmm.
Did they do surgery at your hospital?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to ask you a few questions about the living conditions. How did you stay in touch with family while you were in the service?
By mail.
And the mail got through? Did you receive regular mail delivery while you were overseas?
Yes, they had a post office. It's funny, though, the post office, the mail was all laid out on the floor. It was just an empty building, and the mail was laid out. So one day I got a call to please come and take my mail out of there. They couldn't stand it. And it was a package that the family had packed for me. Easter Sunday, they were having dinner together, and they were thinking of me. And so they had some hard-boiled eggs. And it was my aunt especially who packed it, I guess. And she wrapped some stockings and, a slip or two, I guess, and something else. Well, they weren't quite packed solidly, and they cracked, and course, they were down in the hold of the ship, and the heat and all, and they couldn't stand the smell in the post office. So then what was I to do with it? I get it back, what am I going to do? So I buried it. I buried it all.
The whole box?
Yeah.
Did you tell your aunt that's
yeah.
what you did with your package?
Oh, dear.
Your family, how did your family feel about you, especially being a woman and going overseas in a combat area?
Well, I don't know. I guess they were a little bit anxious, but my father was very proud, I think.
What was the food like?
Well, I don't know. They had lemonade, which they call battery acid. But it tasted very good when you were thirsty, and it was warm there. But it was a nice warmth. It wasn't humid like it is around here. And it would shower a bit just walking over to the ward, and you'd be all dried off in a few minutes, you know. It didn't bother us at all.
Now, did you eat
But the
all your
food-
meals in the dining hall that they
Yes,
had?
yes.
And the nurse's dining room was separate from the,
No, it was all one
Everybody was together?
dining room, yeah.
and did you eat the same food that they served the patients?
It was about the same, yeah.
Did you have sufficient supplies and materials that you
Never
needed?
had any problem that I knew of.
So you had everything you needed. What
Mhm.
about the hospital? Did you have enough medical supplies?
Well, that's what I was meaning. Never seemed to be a problem, but as far as we were concerned, we only had what we brought with us. There was no shopping, no place to go shopping, no stores, nothing there. And I don't know, the natives, we weren't allowed to go where they lived, and I don't know what their living conditions were like. But after a while, they hired a few of them, and they did our laundry for us and clean up our rooms a bit. Just sweep out the sand off the wooden floor.
So whatever you brought for uniforms, you had to make do the whole time you
Yes,
were there?
and we had, after a while, ran out of stockings. So then they said, okay, you could go without stockings, and that's what everyone wanted, you know, because it was very nice not have nylon stockings in the heat out there.
But you still had, in those days, they still had the uniforms were all dresses. They didn't have slacks back then, did they? So you had to
No.
wear dress uniforms all the time?
Well, our hospital uniform out there was gray and white striped seersucker, short sleeves, and just a fitted belt and a little flared skirt. Very simple.
And when you were off duty, could you wear civilian clothes?
No, uniform all the time. And it was white out there. Our uniform was white, no matter what the season, because of the temperature. And the hospital uniform in the States was a very starched uniform. It hardly touched you when it was on you. It was so stiff, you know. A big wide belt, long sleeves, but they were nice, very starched and perky all the time.
Did you feel any pressure or stress on the job?
No.
Was there anything that you did special for good luck?
For good luck?
You know how some guys have rabbit foot or medals or...
No. All I had was my faith in the Lord.
And you mentioned that they had some shows. What did you do for entertainment? they have USO shows while you were there?
Yes, they did have a couple.
Do you remember any of them?
I remember one, it was Bob Hope, I think. And so many people there, patients and nurses and just, not only hospital, then the patients and nurses, and then all the other officers and enlisted men, just a bank of them, you know. And they all loved it, loved the entertainment.
Oh, nice. Did Bob Hope come right to the hospital to do the show?
No, this was out someplace, I don't even know where it was.
So only the patients who you could get transportation there could go?
Yeah. No, I never saw any of them at the hospital.
Do you remember who the other USO show was?
No. Can't remember.
What other things did you and the nurses do for entertainment when you were off duty?
Well, just read, do your laundry, until the native girls did it for us, and play cards, and there wasn't much. We went to the beach. If we were off duty in the daytime, there were trucks that would take us to the beach, and that was called Toumon Bay, Toumon, and it was a lovely sandy beach, kind of a rounded beach, and very shallow water for quite a way, beautiful color and clean, and coconut trees almost down to the edge of the water. And you just get dressed at home in your bathing suit and get on the truck, and they take you down to the beach. And then there'd be officers from other places. That's how we met some of them, just on the beach there. Most of the time it was, of course, if they asked us to go any place, like to wherever they were stationed, that was the only place to go, just back and forth. They had to go through the office anyway, the chief nurse and the captain out there. Captain Flower was the name of the captain there.
And that was your captain or their captain?
He was a Navy captain for the hospital there.
You know where?
In fact, he fractured his leg while we were out there. And he liked to play bridge, so we were assigned to play bridge with him. I had to play bridge one day.
How did he break his leg? He was the doctor there?
Yes,
He
yes.
ended up being a patient?
Yeah, yeah.
How did he break his leg?
I forget how he did it. I don't know whether I even knew how he did it, but
So then he was a patient, you had to play bridge
yeah,
with him?
yeah. Yeah, that was our duty, go to his quarters and play bridge.
Did you have any leave while you were over in Guam?
No, no.
Did you get to travel anywhere else? You stayed right at that hospital? I know you said you never got to see the native people or how they
No,
lived.
there was nothing there. One day, now let me see who the officers were. I think they were naval officers. I don't know where they got this little boat and were able to use it socially, you know. But we went out on it and kind of around part of the island. I don't know what part. Because when we got there, that's where we were. There was nothing, no place to go on the island. Nothing.
Do you recall any particularly humorous or unusual events while you were there?
I can't think. There was so much going on. Well, I know one interesting thing was I love cologne, and I brought some cologne with me. And of course the fellas love the cologne. They love makeup and cologne on the nurses. And these are the patients, I mean, you know, makes them think of home. And so I was using Lanthoric. I don't know whether you ever, that was the brand of cologne. And they, Lanthoric, Lentheric. It was French. And they had Miracle and Confetti and Abiento. Those were some of the scents, and I liked all of them. And it wasn't perfume, it was cologne. So I ran out, and I thought, oh, what am I going to do now? So I got the address from the bottle, and all it was New York City. And I wrote to Lanthoric in New York City, and ordered some cologne. So they sent it. I got it.
Wow.
That was different. It's too bad the post office didn't know what was in that in place of the hard-boiled eggs, you know. Yeah. But anyway, I had quite a supply of cologne, and then the nurses were coming and buying it from me to give gifts to each other. So that's the way we did our shopping for cologne anyway.
Wow. Do you remember any of the officers or your fellow nurses?
Well, the two I roomed with, I was in one of the end rooms. There were three of us, and we were assigned alphabetically. So one was Charlotte Strang, Strang, and she was from New Jersey. I can't think of the town. And the other was Charlotte Swanson.
Two Charlottes?
Yes, and both S's, of course. I was T, Swanson.
Where was Charlotte Swanson
And
from?
she was from Galesburg, Illinois.
Did you stay in touch with them after the war?
Yes, for a while. I visited Charlotte Strang in New Jersey and Charlotte Swanson, and both of them came to visit me in Fairfield. Speaking of Galesburg, Illinois, we were walking back and forth from the hospital one day, and close to one of the buildings, and here stamped right in the metal of the building was Galesburg, Illinois. The material for the building was made there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Charlotte must have gone nuts
Yeah.
over that. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you stay in touch with any of your other nurse friends after the war?
No, they were the only two.
Do you still?
And I haven't heard from them in a while now.
Did you keep a personal diary while you were overseas?
No. Just my letters I hoped would have been, but they were destroyed, so.
Oh, and then you had told me that off camera. Do you want to tell me what happened to your letters?
Well,
You had sent a bunch of letters home to your family?
yes, I wrote quite frequently, and I put everything I could. Of course, the mail was all censored, and but it was censored by the doctor who was in charge of my unit, and I censored his, and that just meant we signed off on them, you know. But I was hoping they would be home, and then I could read them and renew. some thoughts that I had while I was there, you know, but when I got home, they'd had a flood and they were destroyed.
So you have no letters saved?
No, no.
Do you remember where you were when you heard that the war had ended?
Well, I know we were at we were up at the B-29 base, which was very close to our hospital. And I heard a couple of the officers talking about, oh, this is a big one. This is going to be a big one or something like that. So I thought something was going on. And then the next thing I knew, I was invited to a party, you know, such as they were at the CINCPAC, it was called, CINCPAC. It means IN is in, and PAC is Pacific, like control headquarters or something in the Pacific. That was a big center. And I knew one of the officers there, and he was a lawyer, and he was from Washington, D.C. His name, I don't know whether I should put that in or not.
It's all right.
Roger Peed, his name was. P-E-E-D. So that's how come I was invited there. I don't know exactly what he did there, but it was the high command there.
And this was a party to celebrate the end of the war?
Yes.
So you, or that was the first that you officially knew the war was over?
Well, that was official then. That was a big celebration.
Wow. So what did you do? You still had patients in the hospital at that point?
Yeah, we still had them, but they very quickly were dispersed, you know, to Hawaii or California. It wasn't long. And then we were gradually being sent back, some sooner than others.
Do you remember when you left Guam?
You mean date-wise? Well, it was in the fall of that year, of 45, because I went home. I got home on a Sunday, I remember, and it was right after the family had had dinner. I don't think I had told them when I'd be home. I just got the train to Bridgeport, and in the meantime, they had moved to Fairfield.
Did you know that?
Yes, I knew that. And in fact, they sent me a plan, like the architect's plan of the house. It was interesting to get out there and see, you know,
Yeah.
how the house was all laid out. But I just got a taxi and drove up to the house.
Now, when you went home, do you remember what ship you went home on?
It was a hospital ship. I forget which one it was.
Were there patients on board that you took care of on the way, or did you just...
No, no. In fact, most of us should have been patients because we were seasick.
Again?
Yep. Yeah, everyone said, oh, it won't happen again now, you know, and started all over again. And we were in a big, it was like a big ward, one below deck on the hospital, and there were triple bunks. And I know I just lay there on one side for 2 or 3 days. Didn't want to move at all.
How many days did it take you to get back home? Did you stop in Hawaii on the way home?
No, we came right straight home to San Francisco.
So you must have been several days on that ship.
Yes, I don't know how many days really, but I I got over the seasickness after a while and got up on deck. And I remember the first thing, someone came and said, "What would you like to eat?" I hadn't eaten in I don't know how long. And I wanted a ham sandwich with mustard on it. And so I got it. They had ham and they had mustard and made me a sandwich. So I got straightened out then. I hated to go back down. Then I felt so much better.
So then you docked in San Diego?
No, San Francisco.
Oh, San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And were you discharged right from there, or did you have to go to a base first?
No, it was right there in one of the naval offices there. I forget where I stayed. Going out, we stayed at the Moana Hotel. Coming back, I don't remember.
Did the Navy put you up at a hotel in San Francisco?
I guess so, but I can't remember the hotel. I don't remember that.
How long did you stay in San?
It wasn't too long. Had to sign a few papers and so forth. And I bought a new watch, I know, while I was there.
And then how did you get back home to Connecticut? Did the Navy send you, or did you have to get your own way?
Well, just kind of on your own. And I hardly remembered that trip back at all, come to think of it. I just remember, I guess I remember Grand Central Station and then getting a train up to Bridgeport.
So you think you took a train from San Francisco cross country?
Oh yes, yeah,
Didn't fly.
didn't fly, no.
So you did that all by yourself? Got
I was
home to your new house in Fairfield?
Yeah.
And surprised your family? They must have been, what was their reaction when it was you at the door?
Oh, they opened the door and oh. Lots of celebrating.
And was your younger brother home yet?
No, he hadn't come home yet.
What did you do in the days and weeks immediately following your discharge?
Oh, nothing much. I just stayed around home and relaxed and I don't think I went to work for several months.
And then when you went back to work, where did you go to work?
I went to the Bullard Company. I thought I'd like to do something different. I had done public health in Bridgeport, and I could have gone back there, but I thought I'd do something different. And this was industrial nursing.
And it was called the Board Company?
Bullard, B-U-L-L-A-R-D. It was a big tool. They made loads of big tools during the war. I had a sister work there. She was secretary to the chief engineer. And then after a while, my brother went to work there as a tool designer.
So the three of you worked at the same company?
Not all at the same time.
Oh. How long did you stay with the Bullard Company?
Not too long. I didn't like working nights, and I didn't have much choice. There were only 2 or 3 nurses, and the ones who'd been there ahead of me got the preference. So then I heard that there was a doctor looking for a nurse in his office, and he was a surgeon. And his sister was a friend of mine in high school. In fact, he went to Yale Medical School when I was at the Yale School of Nursing.
Did you know him back then?
I just knew him. He worked in the bookstore at the medical school, but he was a little older. But I knew his younger sister, so.
What was his name?
David Monahan.
So you went to work for him in his office?
Yes, I went to see him, and he was just discharged from the Army in Europe. And so he hired me, and I was there for 28 years, I think.
I guess it worked out.
He was very nice.
Wow. Did you go back for any further education?
No.
You had already had your degrees before you went in the service?
Yes, and I did, when I worked in the health department, the public health in Bridgeport, I went to Columbia University for 6 months and took some public health courses, principles of teaching and things like that. And that's how come from that they picked me out to teach in the WAVES Core School.
So you were, so it was WAVES. You were called a WAVE?
No, I wasn't a WAVE.
Now what's the difference?
The WAVES were part of the Navy, but they did all sorts of things like enlisted men, you know.
Oh, weren't just nurses?
No, they weren't nurses.
Oh.
No.
Uh-huh.
Do clerical work and things like that, or of course the ones there wanted to work in the hospital, so we had to teach them how to take blood pressures and temperatures and make beds and things like that.
Now, I know that after the service, at some point you got married.
Well, my husband lived right around the corner from where my family had moved while I was away. And they were good friends, the families. But I knew some of them, but I didn't know him. And he came back, the war ended in Europe, and he was on his way to the Pacific when the war ended in the Pacific, so he didn't have to go there. So he was home before I was, but after a while I met him because he lived around the corner. And there was a wedding in the family, and that's when I really met him and spent the whole day with him, and then from ever on.
Ah, so then you got married and lived in...
Fairfield.
For how long did you live in Fairfield?
Well, we were married 14 years and he passed away with lung cancer.
And did you stay in Fairfield? You stayed in Fairfield until you moved here to Connecticut?
Mm-hmm.
And when did you, I know you told me you moved to Connecticut to take care, or to Stafford Springs to take care of your sister.
Yeah, that was in, let's see, I've been here 12 years, 93 I think.
Wow.
That would be about 12 years, wouldn't it? Yes, 93.
Now, you're a Connecticut native, you were born in Connecticut?
Bridgeport, Connecticut. Fairfield is a suburb of Bridgeport.
Did you join any veterans organizations after you left the service?
I joined the Catholic War Veterans in Bridgeport, but I guess I went to a couple of meetings and then I moved to Fairfield and things changed. I really didn't follow up on that at all.
Did you join the American Legion or VFW?
I joined the VFW here in Stafford when I came here.
So how long have you been a member here?
Okay. Oh, about,
Well, so about 12
about
years.
10 years, between 10 and 12 years.
Do you know what the post number is?
9990. And I also joined the auxiliary, the women.
That's with the VFW?
Yes.
What kinds of activities have you done with the VFW?
Well, the VFW they're having a little problem. The membership is becoming depleted. Of course, World War II veterans, there are hardly any of them. And the younger ones aren't joining up yet, anyway. And, well, they have a scholarship fund, and they have a yearly annual picnic. That's where I think I met Daryl Stark, yeah. At one time, I've met him before. But at the VFW Auxiliary is quite active. And I've been the junior vice president there. And now I am I have to check the books and the records and all, a trustee, I guess.
So you're still active?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And you told me you're 93 years old?
Yes. The meetings are once a month, the second Tuesday, so this coming Tuesday I hopefully will be attending a meeting of the auxiliary.
No. Did you attend any reunions?
No.
Have your nurses had any reunions?
Not that I know of, no.
Did your military experience influence your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Well, I just admire all the services very much. About war, I think it's just a natural occurrence. People trying to get along with each other.
How did your military service affect your life?
Well, it broadened it a great deal as far as traveling and meeting people from all over the country.
You joined the Navy to go on the water because you love the water. Did you go on, and then you were so seasick all the time, did you ever go on any cruises afterwards?
Yes, I did.
You were brave to go back out again.
Yeah.
And did you get seasick every time?
I met, now where did I meet this nurse? Oh, when I went to Columbia. Oh, this was before I went in service. I met a girl from, I think it was Ithaca, New York. She was in one of my classes. And we arranged to meet and take a boat trip, and we wanted to be on the boat most of the time. Left New York and went down and up to Washington. And I was seasick all the way from New York down, the whole trip down. Coming back was all right, but so I was a glutton for punishment. I just kept going because I do love the shore. And
Wow. So have you been on any cruises recently? Is there anything else that you would like to add that we haven't covered in this interview?
No, I think I hit all the highlights.
Well, Catherine, I'd like to thank you for your interview and thank you for your service.
Well, you're welcome for both. I know there are a couple of young veterans at the VFW I've met lately at meetings, and they're always thanking me. Every time they see me, they're thanking me. And I said, don't thank me, I'm thanking you too. They're like cute little boys, you know.